Welcome to Love Your Job, Love Your Life podcast. Today's episode, I am delighted to be joined by Mark Ormrod. Mark, you may know his name. He is the first surviving triple amputee from Afghan, and he spent many years in the Royal Marines. Now, we're not here to talk about that today because Mark's talked about that so many times over the course of the last few years. We're here to talk about something completely different. Mark is on a new venture with some fellow colleagues of his, and they've set up a business called Kaizen Summit. And it's all to do with coaching. As you may well know, if you've listened to my podcast before, Engage to Succeed is all about coaching and helping people. So I'm delighted that Mark is on with me today. Because he's got some really cool things that he's talking about and approaching coaching in a slightly different way. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Kaizen Summit. We're going to talk about Mark's approach to it, and we're going to delve into that. And then clearly at the end, as I always like to do with all of my podcasts, is we're going to talk about some tips, hints, anything that he can share with you that may help you to love your job, love your life more. So Mark, welcome.
Thank you.
You've obviously got a well-decorated career in the Royal Marines, as I've just alluded to. I saw you speak at a conference a few months ago, which was really inspiring for me, as my son has just joined the Royal Marines. Now got back from Christmas leave yesterday, so I'm looking forward to seeing him over the weekend. But as I mentioned, you set up a coaching business, or you've just set up a coaching business with some of your colleagues called Kaizen Summit. You know, why is it so important to you to start this coaching business and start giving back?
It's funny, really, because I didn't set the company up. Over the last 10 to 15 years, I've heavily invested in myself in qualifying as a coach. So I've done NLP practitioner, NLP master practitioner, NLP coach. I've done executive business coaching, spent thousands on all these qualifications. But because my life is so hectic and busy with all the other things that I do, I've never had the chance to jump into it and actually do it, because I understand it's something that requires your full commitment and your full attention, because you've got to give that to your clients. So over the years, I've kind of dipped in and dipped out of it, but never fully immersed myself in it. And then a couple of months ago, a friend of mine who's a retired army commando approached me about this company that he wanted to set up. And initially it was being set up with other Army commandos and other Royal Marines commandos. And they partnered with a group of Navy SEALs over in America. A guy called Jock Willink, who I've just been on his podcast in July this year. I flew over to America to meet him and to do his podcast. And he has a company called Echelon Front, and they take the principles, what they call the laws of combat, from what they've learned in real life experience in the SEALs, deployed on operations, and they've taken those principles and converted them into the business world, because they're universal. The laws are universal and they work everywhere. Now, we partner with those guys to take what they do, bring it to the UK, add our own little spice to it, and then take it out initially into the one-on-one coaching world. We're going to start there, because although that is, I think, the hardest in terms of, there's only so many hours in a day. So one-on-one coaching with people takes up a lot of your time. So although that's the hardest in terms of time management, it's arguably the most rewarding. You can have such a profound impact on an individual's life, personally and professionally. And then we're going to grow it over the course of this year into group coaching, corporate coaching, seminars and retreats, all the usual stuff. And we're just going to take and I've really got excited about this the last couple of days when I've sat and thought about it, because we're going to take what is a whole lot of experience from elite soldiers in America, from the SEALs in the UK, commando trained individuals, all from varying ranks throughout the military, from private up to sergeant major, all with different lengths of services, all with different operational experience, all with different coaching experience. Some guys, I've never had the honor. I've always wanted to, but I never had the honor of training recruits. I would have loved to have done that. But people within Kaizen Summit have done that at the highest level. They've taken, like your son, a raw civilian, put him through the system and brought him out the other end as a highly trained elite Royal Marine or an Army commander or a Navy SEAL. So we're bringing that to the civilian world. And it's fascinating
Yeah.
because having spoken with all these guys now, I never really realized it until now, but we massively undervalue ourselves.
Yeah.
We just do what we do and it's just normal. And then once you do one thing, you tick a box and you move on. And we gather all these skills and experiences and qualifications and this knowledge over the years. But to us, it's just normal. We don't understand the value in it. And now we've come to this place through help and support and networking with other people that we realize the value of it. And not just the value, actually, the need for it, the need in the wider world for what we know and what we've learned. Other people want it too. So we are now going to share that and help change other people's lives.
And what's really interesting, and I've seen this only in the first 10 weeks that my son's been at Limestone, but I've interacted with loads of ex-military people throughout my years, recruitment and talent acquisition. And not only you've just mentioned there that you don't recognize it from an individual perspective around the skills that you have, but I think also corporate businesses and the outside world, so the civvy world, if you like, they also don't realize the power of the skills that you learn in the forces. So I know when you were talking, when we've been talking, Mark, one of the big things is clearly around resilience. And you talk very much about how do you build resilience, but one of the big ways of building resilience is understanding that it's good to fail.
Yes.
Correct. So I've seen it. Joshua's failed in the first 10 weeks, but what he's been trained to do is to accept that failure, because that failure makes him stronger and makes people stronger. So do you want to elaborate a little bit on this first kind of piece that I know you're going to be bringing into Kaizen Summit around it's good to fail?
It absolutely is. And I think we're just raised, well, maybe our generation was raised in a way where failure is looked upon as a negative thing. You fail at your first attempt at something and people laugh and, oh, you're a loser, you didn't achieve it. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that all failure is just a stepping stone to eventual success. And I do a lot of personal development. I go to a lot of seminars, courses. I've immersed myself for 15 years around people that are much further ahead in their journey, personally, professionally, than I am, so that they can drag me up to their level. And one of the stories that was shared on a stage at a seminar I was at, and this kind of really opens your mind. And this gentleman was talking about when you're a baby and you're learning to walk. And he said, babies don't know any better, right? They haven't been beaten down by the world at that stage of their life. So when they start learning to walk, they take a step, fall on their ass, giggle about it, get on with their business, and then they'll have another go later. They don't go, you know what? I had a go at that walking thing and it didn't really work out for me, so I'm just going to crawl everywhere for the rest of my life. Because we look pretty ridiculous crawling around the planet. And that was like a moment for me. I'm like, damn, you're right. Like at that age, you don't know what failure is. And you just brush it off and try again. And guess what? Eventually you can walk, then you can run, and you can do all these cool things and climb and everything. But as we get through life, we kind of get a bit beaten down and we get taught that failure is fatal and final. And it's not. It's just a stepping stone to success, like your son's going to realize. And do you know what? I've thought about this. I do a lot, especially this time of year. It's the end of the year. I look back on the year and I reflect. And sometimes I get quite deep and I look back on my life. And I remember when I was going through Limestone, and failing anything there, in my mind, was a no-go. You don't do it. You don't fail. You just crunch through everything first time, no matter how hard it is. You put in, so much effort. You never want to fail, because there's this thing, right, where you become an original of the troop that you're in. So I was an original. I started on day one with 64 people, got to the end, there were 16 of us that made it through. And it's only a personal thing. And I was like, oh, I'm so proud I did it. I never failed anything, never quit, never did any of that stuff. But then I met people after I'd finished training who had been injured or who had failed and had been held back. And their knowledge compared to mine was astronomical. People would get injured and they'd go into a hunter company, which is where they get rehabilitated. Then they get taught how to use all these weapon systems that I wasn't allowed to be taught because I was so busy trying to get through in one go. There wasn't time for it. And I met these people and I'm like, damn, it's actually a gift. Like, if I'd have failed a couple of times and been held back, I would have learned all this other stuff. Do you know what I mean? Rather than being this constant vortex where I'm drinking from a fire hose and just drowning, trying to survive and get through everything, I would have had to take the time out to digest and reflect and learn things. And I would have came out the other end, in my opinion, a much better soldier. So, you know, it's necessary to fail in some things you do. Now you got to, you know, you got to take this on a case by case basis. You don't want to go into a business and take out, you know, 50 million pounds worth of investment from people and go, you know what, it's all right to fail here, because maybe it's not in that scenario. But in much less risky situations, I think it's important. As long as you understand that you need to embrace that failure and learn from it.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, right? That says, you know, it's okay to fail as long as you learn. If you fail and you continue to fail and you don't learn, then that's wrong.
Yes.
But if you fail and you have a go, you fail, and as you say, you get up, you brush yourself off, and you have another go, and you improve, and you constantly improve as you go.
Yes.
Very different scenario. Sometimes though, Mark, when it comes to failure, and that word failure, you've mentioned it there. As we grow up through our teens and etc., you know, your parents go, "Oh, don't do that because that you could get hurt. Don't do that because it's dangerous, or don't do this." So you get kind of told not to do things because you might hurt yourself or you might fail. But as we go through life and we start failing, let's say at work, sometimes that can lead to demotivation, or for me, in the world that I talk, when I talk about engagement, it leads to disengagement rather than engagement. You've mentioned there that when you were in the Marines, kind of you went through and you just kept going. When you talk to people that have been into hunters, or you reflect back on your career, you know, how do you help people to continue to achieve and keep going? So if they fail, they don't get knocked over and stop. How do you encourage them to continue going?
You have to coach them. You have to be a good leader. Now, I am absolutely not saying that when I went through Royal Marines training, I didn't have good leaders. They were phenomenal. And once I did pass out, they went on with their careers to do some extremely challenging things, what required a very high level of professionalism. But once I left the military, I was still heavily involved with the Royal Marines because I spent 10 years working for the charity. So I was always at Lympstone and I was with my friends. And I remember one of my friends who was a physical training instructor took me down to the bottom field, and they were teaching the recruits how to do regains, which, if you're not sure what that is, there's what's called a static tank full of ice cold water. And above it, there's ropes. And you've got your weapon and weapon on, and you go on your belly, you crawl along, and then they make you hang down. And then you've got a special technique that you use to get your legs back up. It's not about strength, it's about technique, because you've got a weapon and weapon on. And then they teach you this technique to get back up. And if you can't do it, you fall off, you get wet, and then you keep trying. Now, when I used to do that, and I feel a bit stupid saying this because I never failed one of them. I managed to figure it out and do it every time. But when someone failed that back in 2001, when I did it, the training team would take you out the tank, you'd get thrashed with press-ups and sit-ups and runs and fireman's carries and all this stuff, and then told to do it again. When my friend took me down and I was watching these recruits do it about 3 years ago, when one of them fell in, I kind of nudged my friend and said, "Here we go, here comes the thrashing." And he said, no, watch what happens. So this guy got out the water, the PTI that was working with him took him to the side, and I listened to him, and he coached him. He went, "Right, what did you do wrong?" And he went, "I did this, I shouldn't have done that." He went, "You failed to do this part of the technique, go back and do it again." And I was shocked. I was like, and I'll be honest, my first thought was, that's a bit of a pussy way to deal with it. Why hasn't he been thrashed? Anyway, this recruit went back, climbed the ladder, got on the rope, went across the rope, went back and did it again, and he did it. Wow. There was no shouting, no screaming, none of this, you're weak, get back up there. He coached this guy and told him what he did wrong. After he failed, quote unquote failed, got up and he succeeded. So that guy, in my mind, was a good leader because he coached that guy. And because he was a good leader and he coached him effectively, he succeeded. And that's what it is. That's what it's about when you deal with people. When you're helping them, you're coaching them. You've got to be a a good coach and a good leader.
Yeah.
Screaming and shouting only gets you so far.
Yeah. And that helps to bring, excuse me, that helps to bring the passion out in people as well, right? So I talk a lot about passion at work because to help you to love your job and to love your life, you have to be passionate about it.
Yes.
And like when you talk about the Royal Marines, everyone that's there is passionate about being there. Otherwise, you wouldn't put yourself through what you put yourself through to get your green beret at the end of it, right?
Right.
Now, and that's the big shift, I think, that you just explained there, that says actually you are encouraging them to be more passionate about what they're doing by coaching rather than by shouting. Because that's the big difference around if you fail and you get thrashed like you used to back in 2001, for some people that's like brilliant. That just gives them more motivation to do it. But actually from a coaching perspective, and certainly if we talk about it from a corporate perspective or an individual perspective in the workplace, that coaching bit becomes so critical. It really does.
Yeah, because it's very similar, I think, to the corporate world. I've never worked in the corporate world, but I imagine, and I had bosses in the military that were like this, where if you cocked something up or you didn't do it right the first time, their default setting was to scream and shout at you, and then you walk away, and you feel ridiculous, you feel stupid and ashamed and embarrassed, and that's not conducive to high performance. Whereas, I think we've all had those other bosses where they will take you to the side and be like, listen, you messed that up.
Yeah.
I know you're capable of better.
Yeah.
Let's go do this again. If you need some support, my door's always open. I'll come and help you. Let's go and figure this out together. And then you leave there and you feel a little bit stupid still because you're like, damn, I let that guy down and I look up to him and respect him. I'm going to try harder next time.
Yeah.
And it's just such a better way of doing things. Now, don't get me wrong. In the military context, there's always a time and a place for a thrashing or what we call character building. Right? Because you have to build up resilience, and that's forged through adversity and challenge like that. But when it comes to learning skills and techniques and things like that, the coaching approach, or a hybrid of the two, but the coaching approach seems so much more effective.
Yeah. And specifically with technique, right? Because if you get something, the technique is the key. As you said, to do that, it's not all about strength, it's about technique. And so getting the technique right is the bit where you need to coach.
Right. And I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing it for nearly 8 years. And most of that is about technique over strength. Now, if my coach, if I was getting a technique slightly wrong and he was screaming at me going, "You're an idiot, do it this way." That's not going to help me. But if he went, "Listen, Mike, dig your grips in a bit tighter there, twist your wrist this way, put your hips that way. Now try it again." And I nail it, cognitively, that's sunk into me. And then the next time I remember what he told me, rather than being like a scared kid shouted at by his dad. I'll understand it more.
Yeah. And that's interesting. You talk about something else there that's the kind of something probably outside of work that helps to keep you motivated. For me, love your job, love your life, love your job. They're both interlinked, right? So, it's not always about just doing the work piece 100% of the time. And sometimes when people are failing or they're disengaged or they're demotivated, and you'll see this, you must have seen this from a coaching perspective. What else do you do and what else do you need to do to keep people on track? Because it can be very difficult, if your work's not going well or something's not going well, to get sucked into it. But in actual fact, often you need something else. So what else do you help people do to keep them on track?
So that was perfect. You just said you get sucked into it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to take a step back from it because you're so immersed in it and it can be chaotic and overwhelming, especially in a work environment when you've got a million tasks to do, deadlines, targets, and all these things. And it can be stressful, especially if you feel like you're failing multiple times.
Yeah.
You can't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes you need to take a breath and step back, look as an outsider in and gain a bit of clarity. And I find that helps. But I'm a big advocate. This might seem irrelevant to say, but I'm a big advocate of physical fitness. I just think that when life gets chaotic and you're foggy and you can't think straight and you're overwhelmed and stressed out, just taking that time out. Well, not even taking the time out, making it a priority as part of your routine, to move your body, exercise your body. And I don't mean, running ultra marathons every week. You need 20 minutes a day, whenever it fits into your schedule. I do it in the morning Could be at lunchtime for others, might be at the end of the day for others. But just do something to, take that step back from work, go do something physical, get some fresh air, do it outdoors if you need to. And it's like a reset, if you like.
Yeah.
And then your brain, for me, tends to clear up, gets less foggy. Then you can go back and reattack the issues with a clear head.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I've coached hundreds of people over the years with the jobs that I've had. And it's so important. As you say, physical activity helps a lot of people. But I've had all sorts of people, when I talk to them about what do they love to do outside of work, everything from reading or playing the guitar or singing or knitting or what, it can be anything. But it's about taking the time away from work to do something else to help you to reset that mind. So it takes, I like that fogginess, takes that fogginess away and helps you to see through the trees much easier. So great. And for me, that's all about, and I don't know whether you have a view on this, but for me, that's all about mindset, because it's having the right mindset to be able to identify when you need to do it and to actually go and do it rather than just sit there and go, I think I need to go for a run. Yeah. But not actually going for a run.
And this is a difficult bit, right? But this is where having a coach is so powerful, because they can hold you to account. You know what I mean? And every coach and relationship is different. Some might allow things like, just WhatsApp me if you got an issue, or we've got scheduled calls, or whatever it is. But I think for most people, if you're working with a coach and you come up with a plan of action and you commit to it, just maybe the thought of letting your coach down, you're not going for that run. When you've got to check in next time and go, do you know what? I didn't go for that run. Again, it's a little bit like getting scolded by a teacher or a parent. And that's sometimes, it's often enough to get that person to be like, no, I know what I need to do. I need to take that step back. I need to go for that run. I need to get my head. And that's one of the reasons why having a coach and a mentor is so powerful.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, the coaching and mentoring thing. And I've seen this with the work that I do with corporates, with Engage to Succeed. As an entrepreneur or somebody that's running a small business or whatever, everyone talks about having a coach or a mentor or somebody there to help you. But there's not many entrepreneurs or small business owners that I know that don't have a coach or a mentor. Mm-hmm. But then when you transition, if you take that into the corporate world, they just don't seem to have that same mentality. They say that often large organizations of 50,000 people, they look at the high performers and go, oh, we should give you a mentor, or we should give you a coach to help you to develop, to grow. But invariably, it's a very small percentage of people in the corporate world actually have a coach or a mentor. They do loads of training and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's a real missed opportunity, and actually something that I'm unearthing with Engage to Succeed, especially around managers and leaders. They seem to be very lost at the moment in the workplace. They've got 101 tasks to do, but they're not looking after themselves. They don't know how to engage or coach or mentor their teams effectively. And that's where there's a big challenge in my mind with the economy today. I don't know if you have a view on that, Mark.
Yeah, well, I've never worked in the corporate world, like I said, but I would absolutely see the value of it. And if I was a CEO and I had the resources and the funding available, then that would be something I'd absolutely implement.
Yeah.
What I do have a lot of experience in is TV shows. I'm a bit of a nerd. And I remember there's a TV show called Billions. And it's stock market traders. And because it's such a high stress and high risk environment, they have a performance coach. It's the first time I've ever really seen it. And I find it really fascinating. They have this woman in there who's got an office in their offices, and she's the go-to. When they're having meltdowns and they can't figure stuff out and they're stressed out of their mind, they go see her. She works her magic on them, gets them realigned to neutral, and then they go off and they perform at the highest level again. And I did it in my rehabilitation. You said at the beginning of this podcast, I was the first triple amputee in the UK to survive from Afghanistan. So I had no coaches or mentors here. So I flew all the way to America to get a coach and a mentor. He was a triple amputee who got hit by a train in 2002. And what him and his team did for me meant that I went from being told in February 2008, you're never going to be free of a wheelchair, to the 9th of June 2009 to today, having never used a wheelchair in over 15 years because of coaching and mentoring.
Yeah.
Have it in everything.
Amazing.
in life, in work, in sport, in parenthood, in anything that you're passionate about, that you want to be better in. What I tell everyone is go out and get a coach or mentor who's better than
Yeah.
you at it and learn from them. And then you
Yeah.
get, you get the inevitable, kickback. I can't afford it. I'm like, it's not an expense, it's an investment. You're investing in yourself to be better personally, professionally, whatever it is. And, I always get asked when I do these podcasts, what's next for you? What are you trying to achieve next? And I always say, look, my overall goal in life is to become the ultimate version of myself. And it is a
Yeah.
never-ending journey, which is what makes it so exciting. So I'm constantly looking for mentors in everything I do, whether it's business, whether it's sport, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, even coaching itself. I'll find someone who's better than me that can make me better at being me. I wish I knew this at school. I wish they taught this stuff at school.
Yeah, and they just don't. They don't teach anything like that at school. It's just how to pass an exam. So
But that's why we do it, right? To get them.
Yeah, exactly. And look, you've had some amazing experiences, both good and bad, but even the bad ones have made you even stronger than you were before, probably. But so we've talked about failure, we've talked about passion, we've talked about mindset, we've talked about coaching, mentoring. If you were to pick one thing out that would be the most solid piece of advice from all the experiences you've had, what would it be? If people were sat there struggling, not knowing what to do, where to go, what's the biggest bit of advice that you could give anyone, Mark?
It's a great question. So if it's somebody who's sat there, who's in it, who's struggling, I'm going to assume that they're overwhelmed, frustrated, angry, confused. But I would say what I said earlier is take a step back. And what I'd really love human beings to do, because I don't believe they do this enough, is to understand the power of personal development and working on yourself. I don't think we as humans ever take enough time to do that. And it's not through any fault of our own. I think in the Western world, maybe it's just not pushed. It's not a thing that we promote. And then as you become an adult, you get so busy in paying the mortgage and work that you don't feel you have the time to do it. But the last 15 years when I've fully immersed in this, it's been so powerful to me to figure out who I am, to gain clarity on what I want out of my life, to set goals around what I want out of my life, to get mentors and coaches, to create plans, to take action, to move towards those goals. And it's just exciting. You realize you don't have to be on this hamster wheel of, do well at school, get a job, start at the bottom, work your way up, retire whenever the government decide to push it to like 120 by the time my kids are old enough. And then, enjoy your life then. You can enjoy your life from the minute you decide to start enjoying it. And you can merge your passion with your profession, and you can, rather than get this work-life balance, just merge it and earn money from doing what you love. And then, the world, you see the world differently then. So much differently. You're not just working and working and working to have that one holiday a year or get that one treat or pay the mortgage, but you're living and being able to do all those things. Take a step back, work on yourself. And as a very first step to do that, what I've always found fascinating, and I don't recommend one particularly, but sit down and take one of those personality profiling tests. Some of them are so accurate that they will blow your mind, and you have an epiphany, and you understand, when you start to understand your values, then you know what drives you. That leads to what you're passionate about. That can lead to a whole new career change for you. You could lead to starting a business, and then the passion and the excitement comes. And you'll know this as well. Then those challenges that come up become exciting.
Absolutely.
And the thought of failing becomes a little bit exciting because you're going to learn from it. Or you go, there's a challenge there. I'm not qualified to do that. I'll get a coach or a mentor in that area. They can help me. And then you start doing these things that you never thought you'd be able to do, or that you try grizzing your way through on your own. And it's hard work and effort. And it's just a whole mindset shift. And it's awesome.
And that's brilliant, because it's kind of, it links into what I talk about an awful lot, which is, you've got to understand yourself first to be able to then define what it is that you want to do, where do you want to go, what's suited to you, what's not suited to you. And the more that you understand yourself, the more you can, you actually start to love your job and love your life more. And so it's such a powerful piece of advice for anyone. But the bit that I would add to that, Mark, is I talk about this an awful lot. No one's going to do it for you.
No.
You have to own it. And where you see successful people, and like when you were going through your rehabilitation, you owned it. If you waited for somebody else to own it for you, you'd be in a wheelchair.
Right.
But you took it upon yourself to own it and go, you know what, screw this. I'm not listening to you. I'm going to go and find a way to do this. And you did. And now look at you. So that's the other bit that I would add to it. And what I talk about a lot, which is it's about individualizing it. It's individualizing it for yourself. Don't try what somebody else does, because you're not somebody else. You are you. And that's the key for me. Mark, this has been brilliant. I've loved chatting to you. We've been going for half an hour and it's flown by, as these things usually do. You're going into 2025 with these huge ambitions with Kaizen Summit, which is all really exciting. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, I guess it's the usual platforms. But what I will also do is, if all your contact details, put it into the footnote of the podcast so people can get in contact with you.
Okay.
But anyway, any other way of getting hold of you? I suppose it's LinkedIn. It's the usual social media platforms, is it?
Yeah, all the social media platforms. My handle's the same. It's just at Mark Ormrod. That's all the info on websites and emails and everything like that. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. Good.
Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much for joining me and giving up your time. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I think we could talk about this for hours because we're both on the same page. But thanks again, and lovely to talk to you.
Thanks, James. Appreciate you having me on.
No problem.